some of the 1973 projects that were authorized back in 1973 by the voters have not been started yet. And certainly in that period of time, we should have had these projects underway. We should have had them constructed. I've heard repeatedly that the problem was right-of-way acquisition. And I think very basically, if you adopt a policy to vigorously attempt to get these rights-of-ways, negotiate within a certain scope, and once you have exhausted that, then the only other alternative are the courts. And we should not be afraid to use the court, because it's the third party that is going to decide the value of the property. And after all, that's the only thing that is really in question at that point in time. So an answer is no, I don't think we have.
Next candidate, Mr. Dud Lastrapes, will you please answer that question?
I believe that no matter who is mayor, we all basically have the same resources, the same people to work with, and it's a matter of how you put those resources and those people together and initiate a cooperative attitude to try to get the job done and to achieve the progress that we need to achieve. I do believe that there's been some shortcomings in this area that I think that we could in many ways tighten up the process regarding rights-of-way and the procedures and so on. I do think we have to maintain as much as we can, or keep, in a sense, politics out of decisions in that area as much as we can. And certainly when we make decisions that we need to pursue, let's say a certain route, certainly take some time to negotiate with the people over a reasonable period of time and then take appropriate action, whether or not that's expropriation or not. I do not believe, and I'll make this comment, that we need the so-called quick take procedure or provision that has been talked about in the past. I think that we have all the tools we have presently to proceed in the right fashion, and I would not want to remove the opportunity for anyone to challenge the so-called eminent domain. But beyond that, I do believe we have to initiate a stepping up of the process, make sure we have all the cooperation we need as far as all public bodies or public officials are concerned if we're dealing with others. I believe we also need to place this in the proper perspective of not only short range but capital improvements planning for 5 years, but long range also. And I think that this has to be kept in mind, or kept in a plan which would indicate some orderly growth, and as I said, a comprehensive plan for our city. In other words, traffic should be in there too, so we know where we're going.
Mayor Bowen, it's your turn to answer this question.
Well, I think it's only fair to place before the public the fact that there is a policy. It has been in existence. It follows closely every availability of the law, and it's under the council's sanction and a policy adopted by the Lafayette City Council. We have the appraisals done by competent, qualified appraisers. We then take and negotiate within a prescribed written time schedule to the individual property owners, and then we expropriate, go to court if absolutely necessary. I think one of the important points here to be mentioned is that we're talking about the scope of a project that runs from 45 to maybe 65 people involved in the process. And under the state law, no municipality can take and acquire the land and go on contract until no contracts can be awarded until all of the contracts have been signed with the individual property owners. Now, we have been to court over 200 times, and if that's not taking and exercising the rights and using the courts, I don't know what is. And I assure you the courts have awarded a great deal of the taxpayers' money of this city with no hesitation. As recent as a month and a half ago, we had one case that had been in the burner for 4 months in court, holding up the entire project, the Gilboa Road project. It had been appraised at $13,000. The suit was filed by the taxpayer, the property owner. He wanted $160,000, and the courts awarded him $75,000. And we cannot go on bid until we get the last of those contracts signed on each and every project. But we do have a prescribed policy, and we do pursue the program, and we expedite it as quickly as possible as the law will permit.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Ms. Frances Bernard, and the question will be addressed to Mr. Dud Lastrapes.
Affirmative action on the part of the past city administration has only been partially successful. What would be your plan to improve or increase the efforts to ensure affirmative action in all departments of city government?
Well, first, Ms. Menard, I believe that the mayor's office should have someone, some black, representing the black community. First off, because I believe it is right. Secondly, because I believe it would afford us the opportunity to have good communication within the black community so we can be more aware of those particular needs and thus take action. I also believe that it would be incumbent upon the mayor to look for whatever opportunities would exist to offer our qualified members of minorities and blacks the opportunities to move up in city jobs, to look at a higher profile for blacks, certainly among our directors as well as other job levels within the city administration. I also feel very strongly, being an advocate of the free enterprise system, that I would like to see, to make sure that opportunities extend to those blacks in our community who feel so inclined, let's say, to go into business for themselves, to make sure that we create the proper business climate, the proper climate so that good business can function and operate, and so that those blacks, whether they're involved in contracting work or business, whatever, they know about certain projects, public or private, so that they may bid, so that they may participate in this particular phase of our society and our business and community life. So I feel that there are great opportunities for many citizens in this community, and I want it to be understood that I would be representative of all segments and all groups in our community and want to make sure that those opportunities for growth and development would exist in all areas.
Mayor Kenny Bowen, it's your turn.
All right. Each and every year, the city of Lafayette must file, and we file to meet all federal requirements, all of our reports for the affirmative action programs. The norm in which this city has been evaluated is a 22% population base of black citizens. The city of Lafayette in 1972 had 24% of all of its city employees, of an 880 employee base, were black. Today, 1,122, 33% of the entire city workforce is black. And there is no longer a garbage department. Of the 220, which is approximately 25% of the total city workforce in 1972, 100 of which were in the garbage department. We no longer have a garbage department. So the upward mobility has been there. It's been encouraged in every opportunity for every member of the minority. The fire department had 1 black. It now has 14. Every black person who is qualified by the state-given examination has been appointed in the police department and the fire departments. It's also interesting to note that the free enterprise, as has been mentioned here, we must, and we do, and we have a public policy that notifies all minority contractors of all work that's going on. There's a 10% requirement of the law, and we certainly have met the law.
Thank you. Next candidate, please, Mr. George Landry.
Thank you. I'm real pleased to see that my Republican opponent has picked up on some of the programs that I established in my platform, one of which is to create a commission on the needs of blacks. And I would use this commission to help in the affirmative action, because I think the affirmative action works 2 ways. One, that we have to go out and seek qualified blacks for positions in city government, and not just numbers. I think we need to have them in all stratas of the city's operation. But beyond that, we do operate with the civil service system with the city of Lafayette, and as such, the applicants do have to qualify. And I think I would, the reason I'd want to set up, one of the reasons I'd want to set up this commission is to seek out, to assist the individuals in being able to take these examinations and qualify for the positions, because the mayor receives 3 names from the Civil Service Board that he must appoint from. So he does not have the prerogative to go down to the 5th, 8th, or 10th applicant on the list. But the commission that I propose to establish would help the city administration in seeking out and obtaining qualified blacks in all stratas of the city government, not only at the lower end of the pay scale. And I've also announced that I would have a liaison in my office to work with that commission.
Thank you. Our fourth panelist, it's now your turn, Mr. Minos Simon.
Thank you. There's been a high level of public interest and concern over the creation of a city-parish government system. My question to each of you is, are you for or against a city-parish government system that will include all services and all departments or agencies of government? And if you're for or against that proposal, explain in detail why.
This is Mayor Kenny Bowen's turn to answer first.
Yes, I have no personal prejudice against a form of government that will provide the maximum services at the lowest possible cost to the taxpayers. I think we have a great deal of duplication. Right now, while we're sitting at this table, if the governing authorities were willing and disposed to such a condition, that would be possible tomorrow. If the police jury would work with the city under Section 4.1 of our city charter, there's nothing that prohibits those two bodies under the law and charter from having joint venture contracts. We've done this with the collection of the sales tax. City took the initiative. We've done it with fire protection. The city took the initiative. The city took the initiative in garbage collection, garbage disposal for the parish and the city of Lafayette. There's a history of initiative here that says we have no opposition to a structured form of government that will provide the maximum quality service in the greatest quantity for the cheapest cost to the taxpayers.
Thank you. Mr. George Landry?
I am in favor of city-parish government. I have been, and I am not only in favor of it at the present time during the campaign. I have gone out before the Charter Commission. I was the first person to appear before the Charter Commission, expressing my views that I felt that for the parish of Lafayette, because of the small geography of our parish and the size of the city, the main city in Lafayette, that city-parish government would be beneficial for Lafayette Parish. I still feel that way at this time, and I think that the services could be provided at a lower rate, plus the fact that we could provide better service to the entire parish. We have some 43 elected officials in this parish, and I say to you, even though we have the tools to work with under the city charter, as the mayor expressed, we will not get 43 elected officials to agree. We had a fire plan. There was a parish-wide fire plan, and I'm sure you've read in the newspaper where this was presented. The fire chief was prevented from going before the Charter Commission at first to present the parish-wide fire plan. So to sit and say that, yes, it's possible, yes, it is. But it's not going to work because no elected official wants to relinquish his power. And the only way we're going to get that accomplished is through city-parish government.
Thank you. Mr. Dud Lastrapes?
Yes, pick up at that point. I believe that it's going to be incumbent upon the mayor to pursue this particular question, Mr. Simon. I think the mayor is a central point to create that kind of initiative so that we can move forward in that area. I certainly am for the concept of city-parish government. To be honest with you, I cannot say at this point what is the best form it should finally take, or what form will be offered to the people of this community and this parish to vote on. But I believe it is essential that we get together. The idea here is to unify our efforts, and certainly that will hold true regarding a consolidation of government, a consolidation of services, and certainly there are many areas. The financial services, the mayor mentioned the sales tax. As you know, the school board collects the sales tax for the city, the school board, the parish, and the municipalities. There are many other areas in the financial area of operation of the city and the parish we can come together. Public works is another one. I would certainly include police and fire protection, because I think that we have to maximize the tax dollar that we collect from the people and maximize the efficiency of our operation. Now, ultimately, it probably would be best if we would, at this point, get a city-parish form of government, or total consolidated, whatever it might be, and then to pursue the ultimate consolidation of services. But in the meantime, I think we can and should pursue consolidation of services. And that another area I want to mention at that point is I think that we should consolidate is our planning. I think it's essential that we have a good comprehensive plan for our community, and in this effort we should see a consolidation as soon as we can of our planning commissions back into one metropolitan planning commission.
Thank you very much. Now we'll go to our second round of questioning, and we will start with panelist Walter Landry. And Walter, Mr. George Landry will answer first.
Mr. Landry, the city charter is now 8 years old in Lafayette. There are perhaps some desirable changes that should be made in it. I don't know. I'd like to ask you, what changes, if any, would you like to see in the city charter? You'd be in a position to recommend them if elected mayor. And one question in particular, would you support a 12-year limitation of continuous service in any one elected office in the city?
Okay, Walter, briefly, I do not know of any changes in the city charter that I would propose. There were some problems at first. Some of those changes have been made. Others have been made through ordinances that were adopted in the area of purchasing contracts and this type of thing. It was a problem at first, but that has been resolved. So I don't know of any problems in the city charter, and I would be in favor of a limitation of 12 years. I think that an elected official serving 12 years in one capacity should move on. I think that if he has served the community well, then he can move on to better and greater things.
Thank you. Next candidate to answer is Mr. Dud Lastrapes.
Okay, Walter, I realize there's some differences of opinion, I suppose, as to how effective this particular form of government is we have and whether or not the charter is completely up to date or whatever. But I think whether it's this charter or any other system that we operate, it's only as good or as bad as the officials or the administrators who operate and function in that particular climate. It's been said, of course, and it is true that the council basically does have the power, has the power of the purse strings to set policy, and the mayor carries out that policy. But I believe a point should be made that I think the mayor, whoever he is, can achieve a certain amount of power and strength by working strongly with the council and with other public bodies and selling his point of view. I think the charter does provide a sort of a check and a balance, which we may not have had before, clarifies some duties of departments, and opens up the affairs of government to people. I have said on the other issue of the question you raised in the last 15 seconds that 8 is enough. I've indicated in my earlier announcement when I made this announcement back in January that I felt 2 terms would be sufficient.
Thank you. Mayor Kenny Bowen, you please answer.
Just resigned from the school board.
I'm in my second term.
All right, to answer the question specifically, there are 3 changes that I would recommend in the present city charter. Right now, it's only had 1 amendment that was adopted. There were 13 amendments offered. 1 was approved by the voters themselves, which is what it takes, voter action. 1, I would strongly urge that the taxpayers in the amendment process give the mayor, whoever he might be, line item veto. Secondly, I think that the non-civil service status for both of the chiefs ought to be fulfilled in the interest of serving the mayor. And third, we should have a revision of the municipal governmental civil service system whereby the director is appointed by the mayor and all the records are consolidated under the Division of Personnel in the Department of Administration for the City of Lafayette.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Dr. Bienvenu, and the first one to answer would be Mr. Dud Lastrapes.
Rising inflation, government regulations may curtail consumer credit. Will our sales tax revenues suffer as a result to the point of diminishing any city services in any way?
Well, Dr. Bienvenu, I'm not quite sure if I can properly answer that. Certainly it's sort of a complex question in a way, because if we continue to have inflation, it's going to be difficult to determine whether or not, because of that inflation, we're going to have a corresponding recession which would cut down some spending and thus reduce the take into the treasury, our treasury coffers. But also, on the other hand, with inflation, it does automatically raise the revenues or the intake of government. So, in a sense, it may be paradoxical, but I do think that beyond that, the economy of this area is very strong and very sound, and I would think that we would not basically have that particular problem, and along with that we may see additional opportunities for aid from our state coming from the so-called decontrol of oil and gas.
Thank you. Mayor Kenny Bowen.
Answer you specifically, yes, it will have a direct impact on the city's income. No sales tax, just that simple. And the attending results are such that it can have a dramatic impact on employment and the ability of the city to provide services to the people who are paying the other direct recurring taxes. Secondly, the comment was just made relative to the solid state of our economy. We have been fortunate up to now. But we have right now in the midst of this country a brewing condition that will touch us directly again and again touch the sales tax. That is the home building industry. The financial picture all the way down to the ultimate construction. And there are 15,000 people in this area whose jobs are dependent upon the home building industry that could be economically touched very dramatically very shortly.
Thank you. Mr. George Landry?
I think that the inflation will have some effect certainly on our economy. I think that because of the area that we're residing in, the tremendous growth that we are continuing to experience, it has not slowed down with the exception of the single-family residence. I think that basically the effects will be felt. To what extent, I don't think we can predict at this time. I think that very basically we are a shopping center, we're a shopping area, and the fact that we do have a strong sales tax revenue coming in, I don't know that we will have to curtail any services, but certainly the services, if they have to be curtailed, should be presented to the public and let the public decide what services, if any, they want to reduce and how.
Our next panelist is Ms. Frances Bernard, and the first answer will be Mayor Kenny Bowen.
With all of the work being accomplished by the city administration to provide better access for people into Lafayette, very little seemingly is being done to improve the many streets in the low-income neighborhoods. What would be your administrative plan to provide for the upgrading of streets, such as curbs and gutters, in the minority kind of neighborhood?
Well, all of the federal funds that have been made available to this community have gone into the target area that you define and are the only areas eligible for the use of those funds. We have spent them for streets, drainage, sidewalks, recreation, public buildings in the target areas. To answer you now about what would be done, the rest of the community has a matching front foot assessment program. That has been one of the problems. But the city has maintained and budgets each and every year, Mrs. Bernard, a resurfacing program for the entire community. And that's been ongoing for the last 8 years as a budget item annually.
Thank you. Next, Mr. George Landry.
I think basically that the federal dollars that are spent in those areas are far targeted areas and certainly do help. I think beyond that, there certainly should be additional funds spent, as is spent in the rest of the community, for the upgrading of the streets as far as resurfacing and providing of necessary drainage. In the area of curb and gutted streets, of course, that is a problem that has to be attacked the same as it would be in any of the other areas of the community on a front foot assessment or participating basis. But we should spend some of your regular capital improvement dollars to make some of the drainage improvements in the minority area as well as every other area in the city.
Thank you. Mr. Dud Lastrapes.
Well, I would certainly want to see whatever programs are available at whatever level of government that we have to assist us in this area, and to pursue the acquisition of those programs, to place this on certainly a high priority list within our community, and also, as I indicated earlier, to pursue this within the concept or the idea of encouraging some development, particularly in the downtown area, so we can see the kind of improvement that will eliminate some of the conditions that you speak of.
Thank you. Our fourth panelist, Mr. J Minos Simon.
As we all know, the downtown area of Lafayette has been dying for some years now, and it's practically dead. What, if anything, would you propose or will you do to revitalize this important area of our community?
Mr. George Landry, you're first this time.
Okay, in that area, I think one of the basic needs is for encouragement of self-help in the downtown area, along with some capital dollars initiated by the city of Lafayette. I think basically the sidewalks in the downtown area are in a deplorable condition. Some of the buildings in the downtown area, if you've been there lately, are being revitalized by the owners. I think the downtown area is far from being dead. I think the downtown area is not going to continue as a shopping center, as a shopping area, but it will provide for work in both the governmental agencies, the financial institutions, as well as office. And to assist in those areas, I think the city should spend capital dollars and certainly redo the sidewalks in that area, plus any additional help that we can get through funding of UDAG funds that can be applied to the downtown area as a target area.
Thank you. Mr. Dud Lastrapes?
Well, as I've indicated earlier, Minos, I think we ought to try to encourage as much as we can the development in the downtown area to provide whatever services we can in the city. George, of course, mentioned sidewalks, and that certainly is one. I would like to consider also the fact that we have some opportunity here to look at some housing development, I think, whether it's for students of USL, our university, or whether it's for the elderly or apartments or whatever. I think there's a great opportunity here because we're seeing so much of this in outlying areas in the so-called city sprawl, and it's making it difficult to handle, to provide services to, and to get to and from with the high cost of fuel. I want to mention one other thing in the closing seconds is, and this is at this point simply conceptual, but I would like to look at whatever opportunities exist, and I understand some other cities are trying them, a partnership between the public and the private sector to try to encourage this kind of development which would improve the downtown area.
Thank you. Mayor Kenny Bowen?
Thank you, Dud. You're doing it in Lafayette right now. It's called UDAG, and it's been underway for some time. I'd be happy to take and make all the information available to you and for your information. The downtown is not dead, Minos. I drove down there Saturday again just to be sure of what I'm saying to you. The last, quote, controversy that we had, one of the last controversies, was over the one-way directional influence in the downtown, and there were vacancies at the time. But it was predicted and prophesied that there'd be a lot more vacancies. Go right now. There's not one vacancy in any one store downtown on Jefferson Street from the underpass to the old City Hall except the buildings we vacated. That's number one. Number two, we are eligible and are right now in contention the only city for UDAG fund, which is the restoration and revitalization of the old hotel, the Garden Hotel. And third, you have a central business district plan tied into the new municipal building, tied into the convention center, which will give you an economic flow from the CBD, municipal government, out into the convention center.
Thank you very much. Now we'll start our third round of questions. This time you'll have just 1 minute to answer. The first panelist is Mr. Walter Landry.
I'll try to have a brief question. One of the duties of a mayor is ceremonial public relations type duties. Another one is administration. One of you is reportedly strong on administration, and two of you are reportedly strong on public relations type functions. What percentage of the time do you think a mayor should devote to administration? What percentage of his time should be devoted to ceremonial public relations type duties?
Mr. Lastrapes.
Okay, Walter, if I can, I don't know if I can answer that percentage-wise at this point. There is one thought in my mind on this and we have kind of hashed this out in many mayor forums that we've had prior to tonight. But I do believe in my particular approach and philosophy would be to go along the lines of delegating authority to key people, and certainly keeping a pulse on the operation of the various departments under the mayor, and certainly realizing that ultimate responsibility rests with the mayor. As far as percentages, I would imagine at this point between the two probably maybe 75-25, but if you break it down into other functions in which the mayor has to also cooperate and work with state officials, police, jury, municipal people in the area, or the association, the Chamber of Commerce groups in the community, we probably could spread that out into 25% areas to try to briefly wrap this up in the last couple of seconds.
Thank you. Mayor Kenny Bowen?
I would say 100% of the time for both of them. It's been my 8-year experience that the public happily invites me to represent this city at their events and occasions. And I think that that's almost demanded inherent in the office, whoever the mayor might be. And I guess you were talking about administrative responsibilities. I like to think that we have met those responsibilities in terms of the time required and not punch a clock concept for this city's office of mayor. So my answer to you, Walt, would be 100% of the time required to get the job done. I think that's an experience and a talent and a skill that needs to be embodied in the person who will represent you both officially and administratively.
Thank you. Mr. George Landry?
Walter, yes, I am very strong in the administration end of it because as the chief executive of the city of Lafayette, the mayor's prime responsibility is that of administering the affairs of the city, much as the president of any corporation would do. And I think much like the president of corporation would do, again, he is representing that corporation as the mayor is representing the city as far as public relations is concerned. I think that you do have to have a strong administrative background. You have to have that administrative ability to delegate responsibility to your department heads, and also with that responsibility, delegate the authority. You're looking at a $160-somewhat million business, the largest business in this parish, and certainly one man cannot administer the entire operation, and it does take the delegating of the responsibility and the authority if the department heads or other officials are to carry out the job.
Next panelist is Dr. Bienvenu.
Do you think our city had an orderly plan for growth in the 1970s, or were the present traffic problems we're experiencing inevitable?
This is Mayor Kenny Bowen's time to answer first.
I think that because we've had the good fortune to have continued growth, that the inevitable condition of traffic had to be the outcoming results. I think we were involved in a phenomenal growth picture for this immediate piece of real estate. And again, we come very heavily under the influence and under the legislative laws of this state as to what we can do with the arteries that we don't own, and we have very little influence over them. And that's been part of the problem. I think that we have a plan. It's in the process of being implemented in an orderly, transitioned period. I think we have maximized and utilized most efficiently what we have in this interim period. I think we have a planned program to the public for the cost necessary to take and continue this arterial development program to serve a continuing growth need, which I hope that we have.
Thank you. Mr. George Landry?
I don't really think that we had a very definitive plan for the growth that we're experiencing in the 1970s, and therefore we are having terrific traffic problems. And that's one of the reasons that we are having that problem, because we had at one time one regional planning commission that did the planning for the city and for the parish. The planning commission was split into a city planning commission and a parish planning commission. I think it's essential that we put these two together. Also, for many years, we went without a traffic engineer, and I think that was essential in planning for today's growth. And I think the planning commission being regrouped and a metropolitan planning commission, a regional planning commission, a parish planning commission, whatever you want to call it, it has to be for the entire parish, because you cannot plan properly within given boundaries.
Thank you. Mr. Dud Lastrapes?
Well, I've said earlier, I think one of the greatest needs that our community has is for a comprehensive plan, and that for growth. And that would include, of course, traffic and zoning and annexation. We've spoken briefly about those earlier. But I think you're seeing an example of the lack of that plan when you see so much of what I mentioned earlier also in a comment, so much sprawl in outlying areas of the city. And as a result of that, the lack of planned development, certainly it's nice to have some of the areas of development we have, but they do present problems when that comes before the traffic planning, and then we have to look at ways of how to get there and possibly go through heavily developed and dense subdivisions, and it is a very serious problem. And in some areas I can't see the feasibility, economic or otherwise, of trying to run traffic routes through many of those highly developed areas. to try to reach the development we have in outlying areas. So I think we're really in need of a comprehensive plan for our community's growth, and included in that would be an outline of some traffic needs and how to answer them.
Thank you. Our next panelist, Ms. Frances Bernard.
Over the past few years, little has been done to increase the units of housing stock for low/poor income families within minority neighborhoods. What does your administration propose to do to ensure some adequate balance in housing stock availability for lower/poor income families?
It's Mr. George Landry's turn to answer first.
I think there is a need to work with the private sector as well as nonprofit organizations in those areas, utilizing funds that are available to the city of Lafayette, to the community, through the CDBG program, the Community Block Grant Funds that are available to the city of Lafayette and can be utilized to provide for revitalization and also provide for units of housing in those targeted areas. The targeted areas need to be defined, and those need to be defined by the private sector and the nonprofit organization, as I mentioned.
Thank you. Mr. Dud Lastrapes?
Yes, well, again, I see the need of that fitting into an overall plan for our community, and we mentioned the downtown area development and revitalizing of that particular area, and I feel strongly about moving in that direction, looking into whatever possibilities that exist to improve. I think that we not only should continue whatever programs that we have, revitalize others. There is a possibility, and this has to be weighed, of course, from an economic standpoint of feasibility, and that would be the use of the codes and permits to enforce that where it's feasible. I like the idea of in some areas, I understand that they're looking at the modular home approach. I can't say if this particular approach would work, but I like to look at that possibility. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the possibility of a partnership between public and private sector to accomplish this.
Next is Mayor Kenny Bowen.
Well, we have right now, we're participating in a application for a UDAG grant to provide 68 housing units in the Azalea Park area. We have provided in the last years, we've provided that 62 housing units have been repaired. We're in the process of maintaining what we have, because when you go into the relocation of human beings without having housing to provide them to live in while you're trying to take and solve a housing problem, you haven't solved the housing problem, you've created another human problem with housing. We have also brought up to date 179 houses up to a livable standard with federal funding. The most important thing is the partnership concept that the federal government is sponsoring today on the local level to take and have local monies with local initiatives join in this partnership. We have had very few takers for this particular program.
Thank you very much. Our next panelist will be Mr. J Minos Simon.
Well, as we all know, annexation is a device available to municipalities for orderly expansion, and it tends to create a lot of controversy in the process, and some inequity exists, and it involves a capital outlay on the part of the municipality when such a thing is done. I'd like to know what is your attitude toward annexation, and secondly, by what standard will you determine when annexation will take place?
Mr. Dud Lastrapes.
Minos, I believe annexation basically is a good tool for cities' growth if it's used properly and if it's done in an orderly manner. Again, it should come back to, I stress this idea again, it fits into and is part of an overall comprehensive plan for our city's growth. But I think that we need to make the kind of economic feasibility determination to see how it benefits an area and how it benefits a city. Also with that, if we're going to look at annexation, to provide, if we can, all the services for that particular area, not only water and sewage, but electricity too. I think it's essential for the economic well-being of the city. I believe it's important that we look at contiguous areas and not try to go around certain areas so that we make it economically unfeasible to provide those services, and also to certainly provide services to the presently incorporated area of our community before we do. But we must have a plan to do this.
Thank you. Mayor Kenny Bowen.
Well, unofficially, the policy has been, it will continue to be as long as I'm mayor, we'll take no one into the city unless they want to come in. I think that's important. I think what it looks like on the map is very important also because of the law. In other states, we have the township, these squared-off pieces of real estate. In Louisiana, we live under the Napoleonic Code. We follow natural boundaries and property ownerships, and these two have influenced us. Our city's position has been to take and pursue the path that would take and enable us to have a continuous growth pattern, enable us to take and serve the needs immediately adjacent to the present city limits, and hopefully to take and continue an economic growth as well as a physical growth for the city. We have increased in the last 8 years 6.73 square miles our territory.
Thank you very much. Mr. George Landry?
I think annexation as planning should be done professionally. I think that all of the annexations that are proposed should be looked at by the city as a whole, with all departments looking at it, evaluating, determining what services and at what cost these services are going to have to be provided, determining what cost we have in going past an area where we are not annexing to get to another area, and providing the island type of areas that we have presently in our annexation procedure. At the present time, basically, the annexation policy is directed by the utility department to provide areas with utilities in order to make the dollars for the utility system. However, I think that has to be looked at so that we have a cost-effective program in providing all of the services, not only utilities, because when you go beyond that, then you are putting the police department, fire department under a bind.
Thank you very much. We've got a little more time left, so we'll have to ask you to hold your answers down to 30 seconds this time. And Mr. Walter Landry has the first question, and it's addressed to Mayor Kenny Bowen.
Mayor Bowen, if you have an opportunity to lower taxes, you have licenses taxes, sales taxes, and property taxes. Which would you tend to lower first if you ever had an opportunity to lower taxes? Which is the one that you'd move downward on first?
Give me the three alternatives.
License taxes, property taxes, sales taxes.
License taxes.
All right.
Mr. George Landry is next.
Question. I would move to lower the property taxes first. I think that in the license taxes, you're speaking of the occupational licenses, and I think that the consumer bears that cost anyway, and I think that the property tax and the sales tax would be the last.
I think property and sales are fairly close, but I would lean toward reducing property taxes too to encourage home ownership. Make sure we move in that direction.
Thank you very much. Our next panelist is Dr. Bienvenu.
Would you be in favor of rerouting Evangeline Thruway to bypass the very congested cross-section of our city that it passes now?
It's Mr. George Landry's turn first.
Okay, I think very basically the construction of a bypass loop around the city as proposed would do essentially that, and yes, I would be in favor of that and would push very strongly, because I think that we should have been pushing very strongly for it. I did for the last 3 years with the Chamber of Commerce Goals Conference. However, not being an elected official, you can't get too much accomplished in those areas, but I think we need a concerted push to get the bypass loop around this city constructed, because it will take the traffic out of the center.
Thank you. Mr. Dud Lastrapes.
Since the loop primarily now, the outer loop is being proposed for the western and southern portion of the parish, I would agree with that would help us to extend it and complete it on the eastern portion of the parish and certainly relieve the congestion on the thruway.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor Kenny Bowen.
I wonder where they've been all these years. I don't see anything about closing the Evangeline Thruway or rerouting it, Dr. Bienvenu. I think we need the loop, but who's going to pay for it? In which jurisdiction? Who is responsible to provide the funds for this? Are we assuming the city will take and pay for a bypass outside on the state project? Your city funds are paying for state projects right now inside of your city. That should be the state's responsibility. I think we should expand every arterial that is humanly and engineering and structurally possible to serve the needs of this city because of its growth.
Thank you very much. Our next panelist, Ms. Frances Bernard.
In view of many areas of complaint in regards to the new garbage pickup plaguing minority neighborhoods or low-income neighborhoods, would you envision a reevaluation of garbage pickup service, or does the city have any direct control over the people that handle it now?
The first one to answer this time is Mr. Dud Lastrapes.
Well, I think we do need to look at that particular program, and I've said recently, if we're going to go in that direction, we need to make sure that there is competition, and we need to make sure that those operators, large and small, have the opportunity to compete so that we can keep the prices down, and at the same time evaluate it to determine whether or not this particular program is working.
Thank you. Mayor Kenny Bowen.
The City of Lafayette, in this contract and the recent changeover, has complete control over, and the City Council has the management final say-so management-wise in the cost to the service for the residential. The free enterprise system is wide open. Anybody in this town wants to get into the garbage business, be our guest. There's no exclusive franchise. You're welcome to get into the business.
Thank you. Mr. George Landry?
I read the contract. However, nowhere did I see where the city had control over the actual collection of the garbage in the city. I think that basically the city does have a contract where it calls for the fee to remain the same until 1981. However, there's nothing in a contract that says that they will collect certain items or exclude certain items from collection. Certain items are being excluded, and a special service charge are being applied to the residents of this city, which I don't think is proper.
Thank you. Next panelist, Mr. Minos Simon.
Thank you. There's been a great public concern for the cooperative efforts between the mayor's office and the city police department and the fire department of late. And I know that I've heard most of the ads of the candidates that everybody's for harmony. I won't ask you whether or not you're for harmony, but I will ask you specifically, do you have a specific plan that you intend to implement when you are elected mayor that will ensure harmony between the executive department of the mayor's office, the police department, and the fire department, so as to ensure to the general public maximum peak competence in rendering this important service to the people?
Mayor Kenny Bowen.
Well, that's a difficult question to answer in 30 seconds. I don't know if there is any one plan, because the Municipal Civil Service Board's ruling of August 6, 1976 clearly places the administrative responsibility solely in the hands of the Chief of Police and the fire chief. That's a matter of two people. We have lines of communication, but the concerns that we have and the inability to take and resolve some of them are in the areas of high crime rate, increasing crime rate, the manner in which the service is being provided to individuals, and the quantity of service being offered on the weekends.
Thank you. Mr. George Landry?
I think the question is a simple one, and the application would just be good management. I think allowing the department heads, again, to have the responsibility and give them the authority to carry it out. And if the department heads, whether they are in the civil service or not, if they do not carry out your programs, your policies, then it's grounds for termination, and they can be fired, even though the concept is that under civil service you cannot fire anyone. I know for a fact that I have fired people in the civil service and was sustained by the Civil Service Board.
Thank you. Mr. Dud Lastrapes?
Well, realizing the problems or the weaknesses we may have in the system, I still believe it is incumbent upon the mayor to maintain good relationships with his chiefs, fire and police. In the area of delegating authority, training opportunities, I think this is essential, not only for effective police and fire protection, but also to maintain better morale. I think high on our priority list ought to be that Police and Fire Training Center, which was recommended by the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Committee. We need to keep a proper chain of command of operations, and at the same time, however, make sure that the Mayor's office is open for communications to all personnel.
Thank you very much. Now I'll turn the program back.
Thank you.
Nancy Terry.
We hope the information provided during the past hour will be of assistance to you while you are deciding how to cast your vote on Saturday. The League of Women Voters would like to thank Channel 15, KADN, for donating an hour of prime time for the Public Affairs program. A vote of thanks also goes to the candidates, the panelists, and the moderator for their participation in this program. The League urges you to cast your ballot on Saturday, April the 5th. You will not only be voting for mayor, but you will also be voting for city councilman, a tax millage for the sheriff's department, and you will also be privileged to participate in the Louisiana's first presidential primary. Please remember to vote on Saturday. Thank you, and good night.
I would like to